first of all, predictions here?
So we think it's going to be a decent report. So we got 170K for this month's report. Of course, there are some risks that it could be on the soft side. Remember that the payroll survey week was exactly when trade tensions were at the peak, with Mexican tariffs on the table and rhetoric between U.S. and China escalating.
Right, and of course, we'll be looking for average hourly wages. That will be key, correct?
Yeah, I think earnings, we have 0.3% on the month, which would push the year-on-year pace to 3.2. No sign of major overheating there. They were as high as 3.4 in February, so we've had a little bit more moderate pace more recently, but we'll see.
And what's your total number?
Total payrolls, we have 170, and private we're 150.
So you guys are the same on
headline is the same. Yeah, private we're a little softer at 150.
Are we at sort of a bottom? Did we hit the bottom on unemployment? Is it just going to tick back up from here? Do you guys?
I think the general consensus is for no change this morning, but I do think there's a little bit of upside risk to that.
Perhaps going into second half, are we?
Certainly, if job growth slows, as we suspect, and GDP growth is moderating, that you could see, eventual rise in the unemployment.
See, we see a real strength in the second half, right? So we think job growth continues in about the 200,000 pace over the rest of this year. That's going to keep the unemployment rate moving down steadily.
So you think it's going to go lower?
That's exactly right. That's one of the things that, we think the Fed cuts in July, but then stays on the fence for the rest of the year because they don't really go into a cutting cycle if the unemployment rate is still falling.
What's behind that strength, though? I mean, what do you see that so many corporations out there are not seeing right now in terms of their willingness to go out and forecast stronger than expected earnings?
Absolutely. What we're seeing in the U.S. right now is a real renaissance in small manufacturing. A lot of boutique manufacturing. Manufacturers have opened up over the last couple of years. They're hiring a lot of people. We think that strength continues through this. A lot of the weakness we're seeing over the last 6 months is still tariff-related.
But overall manufacturing, we're expecting not a strong month.
Yeah, the numbers on manufacturing overall for payrolls have moderated, certainly. Not really adding very much to GDP growth or the top-line payroll number. But we do think that we're in for a period of moderation and closer to, trend growth of around below 2% for the next 6
Are you calling
quarters.
you're expecting two cuts this year?
Yes.
So you're not with him.
July and September.
You're not with this sort of July.
Well, Rob's in the minority when it comes to one cut.
You're in this July and it never happens again.
That's right.
Then why even go in July? Just because they're locked in? Because they've told everybody?
It's because they told everybody, and because they're still looking for this uncertainty shock, right? They're still looking for this uncertainty shock to start weighing on activity. Right now, they think the economy's okay, but they're worried about what's happening in the second half. I don't worry so much as long as we don't get escalation. So if you were on the Fed,
you would not be cutting?
That's right. That is correct.
Because under your scenario, you think things are so great.
That's right, because we think that the weakness is in the past already. We think that the tariffs hit the economy hard, Q4, Q1.
What do I hope you're right?
But me too.
Well, you don't think
you are such a minority on this.
80% of S&P 500 companies have already pre-announced for the second quarter.
That's right.
That's not just a Q1, Q4 phenomenon. There's weakness going on in Q2 as well.
That's right. But the way I look at that is we had basically a 70 basis point reduction in the level of GDP. And so you have to adjust to that, right? And so some of the larger corporations, they don't got a business for tariffs, but they do get hit a little bit. And they're still feeling those effects.
Yeah, I think the uncertainty out there is going to loom for quite a bit going into an election year. There's a lot of wait and see. We've already seen a pullback in business investment. I think it's only a matter of time. It's a little bit of a misplaced complacency. We haven't seen any
Do you think politics are going to play into this?
I think
the election's
in
going to be
2020, that's already a possible headwind for next year. And I think this uncertainty with regard to trade is only going to linger. There's not going to really be any sort of major resolution that we expect this year, that eventually the slowing that we've seen on the business side starts to creep over to the consumer side. We have slower job growth.
I want to understand your election prediction. My view, and tell me if you're wrong, is unless you told me that Bernie Sanders, or if you told me that Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren were going to make a serious run at the president for the second term, right, and it was going to be close, I would think
uncertainty, right?
I would think uncertainty all over. Every CEO in America puts their hands under the table and says, "I'm doing nothing for the next 2 years because I don't know what's going to happen to me, and I'm going into a bunker." So that I get, but if you don't see that, and it looks like not necessarily the Anthony Scaramucci landslide, and I'm looking at you because that's where he was sitting on Wednesday, because he predicted I think 40 state landslide was what he suspected, but something on that order. I assume that things just keep going the way they're going. Either way, and by the way, I know there are people out there who are in the audience who are going to be like, "What are you talking about?"
That's not a political call. That's an
economic call.
Right.
That's an economic call.
It has nothing to do with politics.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I do think if there is uncertainty with regard to who is going to win the election, and it seems like a much closer race, I think exactly that businesses and decision makers will sit on their hands, and you'll see some kind of wait and see approach to hiring, which we haven't seen just yet, and that'll eventually spill over to the household demand, and we'll see weaker consumer numbers.